Words matter.
Welcome to the Words Matter Pod with Akil Pinnock, a podcast dedicated to storytellers. I'm here with Ethan Bakuli. Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah, got it right.
All right, cool. Ethan Bakuli, education reporter for Chalk Beat Detroit. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, man. So, who are you?
I guess I think first I feel like I feel like a historian. Like I feel like I like to just study people, movements, places we've been, think about places we're going. And I feel like that kind of bleeds into like my coverage area and what I want to do as a reporter today.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, just for a little background for everybody, me and Ethan, we were in the same class together in spring of 2017 at UMass Amherst and Larry Parnas's news writing and reporting class. And that's where I learned a lot of journalistic principles and writing just outside of the editorial realm, writing really more traditional journalism writing style. And I would say, I think it's safe to say that's more in the direction that you're in as far as reporting goes.
Yeah. That was like my second journalism class ever. So I came into it, not really sure what I want to do in journalism. I kind of just had connected with a professor that we both know, Professor Nicholas McBride.
Yeah.
Like that same semester, I think, or the semester prior. And he was the one who kind of like instilled in me like, hey, you've got these aspects of like writing, you like history, you care about the moment we're in and trying to make sense of it. Maybe journalism is like the right path for you. So going into that class, I just knew that I wanted to like try out what journalism was and like actually declare a major by that point, because I was a sophomore going into my junior year, I think.
Yeah.
It's funny to think now that I'm going down this path, because I wasn't really sure, 2 years into school, where I was going to end up being.
Did you have any idea of where you were going to end up?
When I got to school, I knew I wanted to do Afro-American studies. That was my major. There are a lot of things that sort of like led up to that being the decision, but I was like, I knew I wanted to stick with that. But I jumped between like, do I want to do computer science because, I want to be able to like make money straight out of college, or, I also like did some art on the side and was doing that throughout high school and thinking like, maybe I want to be also like doing something creative in that venue. But I just knew it was going to be between the two of those by that point. But then, when I got into journalism, something just clicked. Like the idea of like being able to just write on a consistent basis about things happening in my community. Because I grew up in Amherst, so it just like made more sense to me that I found like more freedom and more like excitement in trying to tell stories about what was going on around the area and things around Western Mass. So yeah.
What were the things going on around that area?
So my family lived in Amherst since my dad came first in 87. My family's from Kenya. So my dad came in 87. Then my mom and my three older brothers came in 88. So we've kind of lived there ever since. He came to study at UMass for school. And then we just kind of rooted ourselves there. But just seeing how Amherst, gentrification hit it pretty hard. It's like, by the time I was going to college, I just felt like you're seeing more of these like really ugly like buildings being erected, just like for like students who could afford, $1,000, $2,000 rents at the time. It just didn't make sense to me. Like this was like popping up in the middle of town, places were being closed down. It just felt like they were trying to create this whole new image with it. And, also just for me growing up around Western Mass, like I knew the difference between like what you see in places like Amherst and Hadley, and then like when you get towards Springfield, Chicopee, Holyoke, and just that divide. And I think when I met people at UMass who hadn't lived in the area, there was just this assumption that Amherst was the entirety of what you saw.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to like demystify that for myself and demystify that for other people by trying to like tell these stories.
And when did that start? What was that one moment in your life that led to you wanting to demystify whatever? Well, yeah, just demystify, what people think of Amherst.
Uh, I think, I think it was always like internally I had that idea. I mean, I always grew up with other African immigrants, like not just African immigrants. I mean, there's a big kid Viridian population out there, um, Jamaicans as well. So we were kind of all like just clicking, meeting up at like family parties. I had cousins, also Kenyan, who were like living in like other like towns nearby. So I just felt like the experience I got, and also that my brothers got. I mean, there's also a huge like Cambodian population as well. I felt like there was just like a mixing of different cultures that didn't always get recognition. So I knew that, but I didn't have a way to like express it as like a, kid going through like middle school and high school. It wasn't probably until I was a senior in high school around that time, when like the Black Lives Matter movement came. Like me and my friends started to organize, and once we started to organize, we connected with people in Springfield and Holyoke who were also like creating their little chapters there as well. So it kind of just like clicked for me to like be building connections with people in other parts of the area. And by the time I got to college, because I had seen all my other friends kind of like leave for other places, either to go to college or just move away from Amherst, I was like, since I'm here, I really want to be able to do something. And at first I thought I was going to be organizing, but then it was like, maybe I want to write about this. Maybe I want to like capture what's been going on. So once I met with that Professor McBride, he sort of like tapped me into his program called community journalism, which was going to kind of be like, for someone like himself, like who grew up in Springfield, like a way to bridge the gap between what was going on in Amherst and what's going on in Springfield. And I just thought that that was like an opportunity that I could take to just try to find an outlet to tell those stories. So yeah.
Yeah. And how important do you think that right? Because I feel like there's different forms of activism. Not everyone can be on the front lines and fighting and being super aggressive and even challenging the authority head on, or challenging the oppressor head on. Activism comes in the form of the arts as well, and how important is journalism and reporting in activism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, I feel like it's corny to say, but people always say like journalism is like the first draft of history. And I really do feel like that's the case. I mean, just seeing the coverage, like just going back to Black Lives Matter, like seeing the coverage when I was involved in stuff back in 2014, 2015, and then when I was a reporter even 2 years ago in 2020, it was like, it was like a full circle moment for me to kind of see like, these protests have been happening here and there for the past like 6 or 7 years. And I finally had the ability to kind of like tell the story in the way I wanted it to be told, or at least be able to like spotlight activists and organizers and say like, hey, we need to be keeping up relationship with them. We need to be seeing what's happening after the protest. Like when people are just like hosting community events, and trying to like give free food and free clothing to folks. It clicked for me because I think when I was just like a high school student looking at everything, when reporters would come up, it just felt like, why are you trying to tell this story? Like, I mean, in Amherst specifically, it was mostly white people, even in Springfield as well. Like everybody was just like covering was white. So I just like didn't really understand why they were coming to talk to us and tell a story and then only walk away with a soundbite. So once I actually got in those shoes, I felt like I had the responsibility to be able to like step out of my comfort zone and really try to like talk to the same people who were in my position a couple of years back, and I still feel that way today. Like I think while I'm not like covering protests and organizing 24/7, I still feel like in any field, like as a journalist, you're trying to like respond to what people are saying and be accountable to the people. So, yeah.
How do you draw that line between getting a soundbite and actually trying to put out something that will be beneficial to you, and not sacrificing your integrity while doing so?
Yeah, I think um, I mean it started for me trying to just like have those kind of conversations with my editors of like what were we looking for here. Um, like I think I was in part deliberate, like to not just want to cover a protest for the sake of it and be like, let's follow up, let's get to connect with people. Um, I mean, I know where I was at like 17 and 18 and like just saying stuff off the top of my head and maybe it didn't always come out the right way. So I was like, I think we want, we're not just fishing for quotes. We're trying to fish for like, what are people really asking for? What are the demands here? How are they like, how does our coverage going to spotlight this issue and point out like what's like really being done? And I think we could also tell better stories when we were looking at like the institutions that people were calling out, like what's happening in schools, what's happening in prisons, what's happening in different, things, what's happening in housing. So I started just looking for those kind of stories where I could just like, I'd still be talking to Black and brown people about stuff that was just like, either blatant discrimination or just the challenges of finding access to some things. Particularly like, when I was covering some of the stuff in Springfield or doing some stories at college. And then I moved out to Vermont where, there are probably a lot less Black and brown people, but I still wanted to do the same thing of trying to like cover them and like, it's like, hey, they are here. If I ended up here, I want to be able to like at least make my reporting highlight that like people are doing work here and people are trying to create opportunities for other Black and brown people who are like moving to Vermont or have lived here for decades.
Yeah. Talk about Vermont. How did you get that job? Because you worked for the Burlington Free Press.
Yeah. So I really don't know how I ended up there. I had two jobs I was looking at. One was in Montgomery, Alabama, and the other was in Vermont. So I was leaning on the Alabama job real hard. I just wanted to like try something different, get out of New England for a second. And they had like a race reporter position at the time. I ultimately didn't get it, but they did offer me in Burlington. And so, I picked it up. It was right after college, like a couple months after, and I knew it was close to home. So like if there was any point I was like, nah, I don't really want to be out here. It's like 2 hours to get back to Amherst and that kind of thing. But I just tried it on a whim. I mean, I think I didn't really know how white it was gonna be. I mean, I think in my mind I kind of was like, yeah, I mean, I've never met anybody else from Vermont growing up in Massachusetts, but I think at first, the first time I came out there for an interview, I was like, oh shoot, I'm seeing so many Black people just on the streets here. Like it's
really,
yeah. Like I was like,
wow.
Like they posted me up in like a hotel, and like the first thing I see is like the person that like is at the front door, the concierge.
They probably planted them. They planted them.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like
Ethan's coming, bring him out.
For real, I was like, yeah, like just like walking around the city at first, like, yeah, this ain't too bad. And then I lived there, and I was like, I lived on a college street where I must have been like, the only Black person, like just like so. And yeah, it was like it was a big culture shift, and it was only like 6 months before the pandemic, so I only got like so much time to really get to connect with people and know people. But the job I had was basically like cover everything, general assignment. So whenever there's a story coming on, whenever there's something popping up, you're trying to like report on that. So if anything, it just gave me opportunities to really like build up my skills as a writer, because up until that point, the jobs I had um, were mostly just like helping other people learn how to write, helping other people learn how to like work with audio, work with visuals. And so I never really got the chance to have a byline, like have my name really appear in any kind of publication. So it was a good like confidence booster. And at the same time, yeah, it was like my first time away from home. So I feel like I really got to start to develop on my own, try to like think about what do I want to do in my career for a next step? Where do I want to end up? I got to connect with like a good group of like um, black folks, like some brothers who really helped me like also just like find community out there, especially during
Yeah.
the pandemic, because we just like meet up with each other, have like virtual hangouts and stuff. So, you know, still have a lot of respect for the community I meet out there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because you grew up in Amherst and Amherst is majority white, do you think it was a little easier kind of assimilating into Burlington because it was already kind of white, well, already mostly white where you grew up?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I just like knew to not, yeah, I feel like I knew how to like just talk to white people, but I think I was just like still like I was so in the mind that what I wanted to do was like focus on covering communities of color, and so I was just like still stuck on this idea like how am I going to do that here? Um, so I just had to be creative about it. Um, and I think it was also just like a time where I was like, yeah, struggling to think like, is this gonna like how long am I gonna be here? Like, do I want to like spend like 5 years out here? Like is this just
Yeah.
like my first stop? All that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, it was just like, yeah. I mean, I think I knew at a point that in order for me to really grow, I needed to just leave because I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, one, it was also just like my girlfriend and I wanted to like move to a place that we could like kind of like both grow. Um, and yeah, I just think it was a moment where I was like, New England has kind of like shown me a lot, but I can also like learn more from trying to live in a different city, a bigger city. Because yeah, growing up in Amherst, I mean, there's not really a whole lot. So I felt like I was very much like I didn't like New York City when my brother lives in Brooklyn. I was like very much like you know too much noise, too
It's
much
a
people
lot of
around me.
it's a
Like
lot of stimulation if you're not from that kind of environment.
yeah, and I think every like if I'd visit, I'd visit for like 1 or 2 days and be like, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out. So I kind of felt like I wanted to challenge myself to like experiencing something completely different and learn how to adapt into like a more quick environment. Because even just like trying to write a report in Vermont, it was very slow paced. Like I could very much have like a work life balance, and that was something that they like told me like, hey, like once it's 5 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock. You're not doing anything else, which was like nice for me. But I also knew like if I really wanted to like identify as a reporter, I was gonna have to like put in more hours. I was gonna have
Yeah.
to like kind of like feel that anxiety of working at deadline again.
So obviously you're a journalist, you're a
Mm.
reporter, um, and you worked in NEPR Media Lab, and you worked for community. You worked with community journalism.
Mm.
So all of these different forms and jobs you had in journalism. What is being a journalist to you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Uh, I think like the things about being in community with people still come through. I mean, to me, what stood out about that community journalism class and like the work I was doing at the radio station was about like not caring about just like your career aspirations. I mean, that's important for where you want to end up, but I knew that I just really cared about telling stories that were going to really like people were going to be able to read them, or listen to them or whatever. Like, I think I never liked the idea of like having stories hidden behind a paywall or like just writing stuff so that in 2 years I could just hop to the next place. Like I really wanted to be able to like start building bridges with folks. And I learned to do that. I learned to do that in and around Springfield. I wanted to like begin to do that in Vermont. And now here in Detroit, I feel like that's like something I'm still learning. I mean, it's a bigger city. There's more ground to cover. There's people in different places, but I like the idea of like, it takes time to build those connections and to build, sources, build relationships with folks and say like, hey, like, here's my card, I'm covering the city, I'm covering the schools, let me know what's going on. Like, you want to have like, I feel like that idea, like, your local neighborhood reporter, I kind of want to be able to embody that. I think that's what everybody should aspire to, not just like, you know, you're the person who gets your like name in like this prominent publication. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's still like a cool achievement to have, but like, I don't even like, I feel like, yeah, if I don't get an award, I'm happy with that. Cause I think like all that matters is like when I look back on this, did I make some kind of stories that like really touched people or really got stuff to change, that got policies to be impacted, got conversations that start happening, got more and more people to be mobilized about what they want to see happening in their schools.
How important is local news?
Super, super important. Um, I kind of knew when I got to college that, well, when I was in journalism, that I wanted to just do local news. I never really wanted to be national. I think I think I got like I had a chip on my shoulder for a little bit about like, I'm still in my hometown. Like I'm still trying to like, I mean, I'm going to college, so that's big, but like, I still feel like I'm trying to like figure out like what my next step is. So for those 4 years, like a big thing I really got to appreciate was like being local. And like I said before, being able to really like see my community and see the area in a different way than I did just growing up there when I didn't have access to a lot of different stuff. I couldn't like move the same way I'm moving now. And that was when it kind of hit to me like, yeah, when you get to like stay local, when you kind of get to build on relationships or like expand on them, you do have that kind of like onus, or you do have like, you have an advantage over other people, or you just have that ability to like tell some really great stories down the road. Um, and yeah, like I think, yeah, like local news gives you that advantage. You get really getting to build relationships over time, get to know people, like not in the same way as like parachuting into a place for like a day. Um, so, I mean, local news is all I really know, but it's I think what's like kept me like humbled, like if like in the places I've had to go, I'm always reminded that like I still have to build these connections. I still have to like do do the work. Like I
Yeah.
can't just come into a place and like expect everything's gonna fall into my lap. I have to really like work to make like the kind of stories that I want to happen.
Yeah. I was once told that most national and international news stories start off as local news stories. Do you think that's true?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think like I think even now when I've seen some stories like for example, when I was in Vermont, like that's where Bernie Sanders comes from, and so I got to actually like talk to people who knew him, hear about like he's walking down the streets like here and there. That's where he goes to get like his like food and stuff, and like it got me thinking like yeah, like once you're in a place, especially when it came around election time and he was running again, like okay, like I get to kind of be at the heart of like a national story, but in the local part of it. Um, and then in Detroit, like same thing, like you know, there's so many stories happening or happening in and around here that now I understand when they pop up and they get that kind of coverage because I mean, I guess I got to just be here first or like hear about it or like know like even just like a couple of months back, Project Leola, Congolese like man who was like shot and killed by police in Grand Rapids, like that's not too far away from Detroit. Like that
Yeah.
story blew up and became bigger. And like I knew friends of mine, I knew reporters who went out to cover that, and so like I got to sort of like see how that story that was local and being covered in the local media just like ballooned into this like big national event. So yeah, I think that's totally true. Like yeah.
Yeah. And then even with Flint, I'm not sure of the local publication that broke that story first, but that started off as a local news story and became national news. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it shows you the power of local news, and it may start off pure though on the ground level, on the smaller level, but of course, once it gets to the bigger publications, then it might turn into like a real entertainment kind of in a way. So
Yeah, and even to that point, I mean, Flint, water is still a challenge there. I mean, there are stories I see every other day about even like the politicians during that water crisis haven't, you know, they're not really going to be charged. And it's just
wow,
like crazy to think. And there are other parts of Michigan too where they're going through their other water crisis. Like there's this place, Benton Harbor, not too close, not too far from like the border of Illinois and Chicago. Um, I think that's the other advantage. Like you get to really follow up on stories after they become big and sort of see like, well, did anything actually happen? Like, did we get a response? Like, even after like the president shows up and drinks water, or like after like people say like this is over, it's not a crisis anymore, it's not an emergency. You can still talk to people and be like, well, we're still dealing with the effects. Like people are still worried if they got cancer from some of that stuff. And I
yeah,
think you know tying back to like the movement and to like activism, like you need to keep on with that coverage so that the organizers and the activists and just the everyday people get to like continue to tell their stories and say like things aren't done here. Like there wasn't like a ribbon tied on it and like you can just kind of walk away from it. Like we still gotta improve things and like actually systematically like change things. So
yeah. We have so many different journalistic routes we could take outside of the traditional linear path of journalism. People create their own podcast platform like this. People write for different online entertainment publications and sports and fashion publications. Why go down a more traditional route of journalism, especially as someone who's a part of Gen Z?
yeah, I think to me, I kind of want to like have like this divide between like what I just want to consume in like my day to day life and just the idea that like I needed to step into the role as like a documenter of those everyday happenings. I mean, when I first got into journalism, I mean, before I even took that class with Larry, I spent a good year just like reading up on like different reporters and different stuff, like whether they're investigative reporters, music bloggers, writing for MTV, Pitchfork, whatever. Like I just really wanted to like understand what it took to be a writer or a reporter full time, uh, and like give myself that confidence, give myself that sort of like, okay, this is what it took that person to get to where they're at. And it kind of taught me that like I mean, it made me feel like I really wanted to go down a path of like getting experience in a newsroom, working with other people, before I maybe stepped out and ventured into my own. And I think it was also a little bit of like, fear of like, what does it actually mean to like learn how to be like a reporter without any like training wheels or like having maybe the security of a space where like
Yeah,
you have editors to like fact check you and stuff. So yeah, it was a little bit of fear. It was also a little bit of like, if I'm going to need, like, this is the sport I'm going to need so that a few years down the road, I can venture out and do my own thing. Um, but for right now, I feel like, yeah, I really also had this like desire to like, yeah, get to just like cover institutions, like get to know something on the inside and out. And it felt like the best opportunities for that were in places that were already established, before I could really like do my own thing. But um, yeah, I mean, I still think about like, yeah, like yourself getting into the podcasting world, like what would that look like? Just even
yeah,
like freelancing, for opportunities. And I think it felt a little bit more challenging when I wasn't in markets or in spaces where like I knew who to connect to. Um, Being in Detroit, it feels like there's more for that. And even with my girlfriend, she's also a reporter. Like I see her looking for those opportunities as well. So, um, it's like exciting to kind of be in a space where we're just connecting with other like Black reporters and sort of like seeing like, you know, this is what everybody's doing differently. Like not everybody's, like you said, on that path of like, I need to be a TV reporter. I need to be like in like a day-to-day newsroom. Like I work at an online newspaper, like online news. So I feel like even that, like it's different from what I expected to do.
Yeah. I mean, once you got in this field, what did you expect to do?
Uh, I wanted to be. My goal was like investigation work.
Okay.
Um, I like I looked up to people like Nicole Hannah Jones and
Yeah.
even Ta-Nehisi Coates. Like
Mm-hmm.
their work really inspired me. So that was like a lot of like the reading I did up on them. I really like the idea of like reporting on race and class, and just trying to tell stories like local stories about those stuff and like what like what's happening in places that like aren't necessarily on the national beat. Um, so I knew that I was probably going to end up in some like random places, probably like Burlington, Vermont, or like if I got a job like Montgomery, Alabama. So there's something exciting about saying like I'm going to be in a place reporting where most people aren't really covering, but able to really build a connection with people and like tell stories that maybe one day like become national or international news. Um, and yeah, and then as I got more into it, I was like, you know, it doesn't have to be in like small towns to really do that. Like um, places like Detroit like popped up as like, you know, maybe I want to go to a place a little bit bigger, um, slightly off the beaten path, uh, and you know, tell tell untold stories, or at least like underreported stories.
Yeah. How much of what you learned during your time in UMass did you apply to? Well, I wanted to ask this question.
Hmm.
What exactly is an identity reporter?
I'm still trying to figure that out. When I applied, I got that, and I wasn't really sure what it looked like. It was like pretty much everything, like anything that involves like the changing demographics of Vermont. Like I said, I mean, I don't know, it's like 90 something percent white. But there are pockets here and there of like um, Bhutanese, Nepali folks, like a steady, like East African, Central African, like communities, like people who came like during the refugee crisis from like all those kind of countries and like get set up there. So that was kind of what I defined it as. Like I really wanted to like look at like the different cultures that are kind of brewing in Vermont and tell those stories. But the job was really about like, you know, telling stories about like how people are impacted by like housing, people are impacted by the lack of internet access, being impacted by like affordability, um, and all like trying to use data. Because I think for a couple of years I was like really like, yo, I need to like be data reporter, do data science, computer science, all that kind of stuff. I thought like that was going to be my main skill set. It was tougher than I thought, so I just kind
Yeah.
of like stuck the writing route. But yeah, when I got that job, like I think I expected like I was gonna just be like this like jack of all trades, like just like be trying to cover all these different things, and then I realized like no, actually for the way my brain works, it's actually simpler when I have like one thing that I know I need to cover and
Yeah.
just like stick to that and try to learn that instead of trying to like learn 20 things and like try to learn about like different housing policies, different education stuff, because then it's just like it all becomes like mush to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I saw that, I'm like, what is an identity reporter? Like, I never heard of that title. But yeah. How much of what you learned during your time at UMass do you apply to anywhere that you work or that you've applied so far?
Yeah, I mean, I just appreciate a lot about it. I so like I said, I took Afro American Studies, and like I really credit that department with like like beefing me up on like that idea of wanting to be a historian and wanting to just like tell better stories about like our folks, and um, just like yeah, so many people and like that passed through that apartment kind of gave me like okay, like like Sonia Sanchez. I mean, even when you talk to John Bracy, like he's just like a walking like history book, like he's been through so much, and so like I kind of like was like like I hope I can be that one day. Like I hope I can just say like I was here or there, or like just have a story to tell about everything. Um, and then in journalism, like yeah, the same thing. I mean, I always credit uh, Professor McBride with just like having like an approach to journalism that I didn't really feel I had seen from maybe other professors or just like in the industry, like very slow, very deliberate, like very much like the work you do like has to be in conversation with the people you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be like looking over them on
Yeah.
the top. So that just like made me be more deliberate about like what I want to really do in my career, and that like when I did tell a story, I felt confident that what was coming out was like we talked about, like not like just like a sound bite or something. Um, it just made me feel like more like meticulous, more like methodical. Um, and when I walked away from college, I was like, you know what, like uh, every like the choices I want to make, I want to make sure I'm making them because like they fit me, and not just because like I need to get another opportunity. Because um, I for the ways that people talk about UMass and think like, you know, it's just a state school. Like I got a lot from it, and you know, I I think it just like reinforced like I wanted uh, like I don't know, I didn't apply to Amherst or to whatever other school was in the area, so
Yeah.
um, I was happy with that.
Why didn't you apply to Amherst? Because I guess it's probably considered more prestigious because it's a private university. So why'd you apply to UMass and not Amherst College?
Well, well, I mean, I did end up applying to like some like liberal arts, like a decent amount, and I just didn't get in.
Okay.
Uh, I think for me, like UMass was like quote unquote like the safety school, at least in the high school that I went to. Like I think people kind of were like, you're not aiming for that. You're like kind of putting that on your list so that if you do get in, like that's great. But it did end up being the only school I got accepted into, and I think I was like disappointed in myself because I thought I had good grades coming out of high school, and like I thought I was going to end up like somewhere else. But I think once I got past my first and second year, I started to feel I was like, no, this is actually like the best choice for me because like one, I wouldn't have to pay out of state tuition where I was
Yeah.
going to end up. Um, but yeah, like just like it kept me close to my family. I think especially for me, just coming from an immigrant community,
It's
it was a
close knit.
completely different. Hmm?
It's close knit.
Yeah, it's close knit, and it just gave me a better appreciation for my parents. Like we just got a deeper bond when I got to stay at home and just like get to know them. And I think I wouldn't have gotten that if I was like coming home only for like the holidays or something like that. And it definitely just helped me. Yeah, I think, and just like molding me into like the person I wanted to be, which I think I was like trying to embrace, um, being Kenyan American and like just trying to understand like what did that look like or feel like.
Reporting can be formulaic in many ways, especially how we're taught in journalism school. But at the same time, you can incorporate your unique writing style into these articles. How much of your individuality is in your writing for the publications that you worked for?
Yeah, I think it shows in like what I choose to write about.
Yeah.
Um, like I don't think I like just wanted to like a struggle I had when I was in Vermont for a while was that like we had this expectation to write a story every morning, um, 200, 300 words or less, and just push it out. And it was like an exercise and be like, you need to learn how to write faster, but it wasn't always what I wanted to do. And it was sometimes like stuff like it's National Ice Cream Day. here's a place you got to go in Vermont to get ice cream. And I was like, yeah, like this is good for getting clicks, but it doesn't always like speak to like the way I want to write or the stories I want to tell. And sometimes you have to like adopt a voice that like is like kind of corny, kind of chipper and like
Fluff.
not what I want to do. Yeah. So I had to always like contrast those kind of stories with like the like bigger enterprise, like long-term stories I want to do, which is why how I ended up trying to like find those stories about like what's going on in like Vermont's communities of color out here, Black communities, African immigrant communities. How are people being impacted by the pandemic? Like what's going on? I was really trying to like chase down like these stories about accountability. Um, I spent a lot of time in the pandemic really focusing like how are people being impacted by um, not getting like their unemployment insurance checks. Like that was a huge thing in Vermont. Like people were just waiting weeks on weeks on weeks to get like the employment benefits or employment benefits. And that became like a story that I wanted to become an expert on. Um, and so like in that way, it was like telling my editors, like, I think this is still important. Like, I think these are still, like, we have responsibility to people to give them that information that says like, this is where you need to go. Like, call up your local senator, call up your local congressperson, whatever, and like tell them like, hey, like this is an issue, or like, um, these are how many people are being impacted by it. Um, and even here in Detroit, like I think now I'm saying like because I'm like covering like school board meetings, covering like different events, I kind of get to like it's less of my voice there, but I feel like now I get to just like listen to people and get the feedback about like this is what like we need you to cover, um, because I just feel like I'm more accountable to more people. Like the Detroit school system has a history before me that like is long standing, and so when you hear like the grandmas and like grandparents who like sort of like been through this generation after generation and seen different things and how the school district isn't the same as it used to be or not as great as it was, I kind of just like defer to them and try to tell stories like through their voices and make sure it ends up that way.
Yeah. Was that a relief to move to Detroit and start working for Chalk Beat and writing about these stories that are really educating people on the history and what Detroit schools need, or what Detroit area schools need, compared to working at Burlington Free Press, and you incorporate your interest in the stories that you report on, but at the same time you got a job, so you still have to write about the state fair or something like that. So was that a relief?
Yeah, it was because I think like my like towards the end of being in Vermont, like my biggest challenge was like feeling like I was always anxious that I couldn't cover all these different things. We were a small newsroom throughout it all, and like as much as I like loved being able to like find my pocket of stories that I wanted to do, I even knew at that point like it was like still there was stuff I was missing. Um, and when I came to Detroit, it was like clear to me that like I was gonna have the advantage of being the only person for the most part covering the school system, the public school system in Detroit full time. So I kind of had like my own little sandbox to kind of learn on my own. Obviously have the expertise of like my editors and other people I know who like worked on this and reported on this city for like years and years and years. Um, it was a lot more structured. And so I appreciated that because I knew that like I knew what stories I had to cover, or I knew what memes I had to cover. So like I wasn't always like scrambling to find story ideas
Yeah.
on off days because like there was always going to be something happening. The challenge though was just like the difference was like when I was looking for stories in Vermont, I could always like it was a lot easier, I guess, finding people. One because it was just like such a small place that
Yeah.
like nobody was really like unaccessible or inaccessible. But I mean, it's tough. Like, I mean, tracking down parents, tracking down students. Like, my job, like, I'm constantly going to different high schools after school and just like talk to students and be like, hey, you know, what do you think on this issue? Like, what's going on here? Especially through COVID when like schools have shut down and things have gone different. It's like trying to find people to talk to can be like a real challenge, especially when you're on deadline. So it's kind of been like a big learning curve. But it's also exciting because I feel like I'm like always like I'm happy at the end of the day when I'm like getting to meet new people and then like hearing more stories from them or like things that we should cover that I have been covering or like finding out like this is what's happening in this school because it's about like 100 schools. So like yeah, every day is just or every week is just another opportunity to be like, okay, what's going on in this school? How can I like write about that? Or like where do I need to go to like write about this topic?
Yeah. So you back to the Free Press in Vermont, and you know reporting on things that interest you. Last year, you reported on a story about Vermont recognizing the third annual First African Landing Day, a day that recognizes when the first kidnapped Africans were brought to Virginia on August 24th, 1619. Burlington is a very white place, as we've discussed already. And although it's seemingly a good thing that the state is recognizing this day, as a black man, do you have any reservations about covering the story knowing that you're the physical minority in this area?
Yeah, I mean not even I think sometimes I think like when you're a reporter you feel like I mean I'm only doing half the work. I'm just covering the thing that's happening. Like the
Yeah.
people that actually organize the events, you know, are pushing for this to happen are going through the worst. Um, and so, yeah, I spent a good amount of time just trying to like write stories that like spotlighted people like the movers and the shakers, people who were actually like trying to create those things. Like one of the last stories I ended up doing was about just like people dealing with the whole like anti-CRT movement and like saying like, oh, you can't teach race in schools, you can't teach about gender, sexuality in schools. And it was like just a good opportunity to just like talk to people like who were like actually trying to have those conversations in these like small ass towns in Vermont where it's like there probably are like five like families of color, you know, one, two black families in that town, and they're trying to like raise a Black Lives Matter flag. That was like one of the first stories I did when I got out there was like, oh, I didn't realize like the first Black Lives Matter flag raised at a school was in Vermont. I thought that was really strange. And then we got to realize like there were just like so many of these schools doing it. And then I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's make a story about this. Like, what's going on in these schools where like these kids are happening? Like, do they even have enough diversity or like you know? But it was like, yeah, it ended up being like, you know, a mix of like mostly white students, but like the few black and brown students in those schools been like, hey, like let's do this. Let's create like a some kind of like diversity student union kind of group. Uh, and so it just put me back into the mindset again of like being in high school and like having that experience with like we created our own Black Lives Matter chapter and we were like traveling to different places in the country to try to like talk to other like more national organizers, meet up with the people who like founded the group and stuff. And so I kind of just tell myself like, yeah, I want to tell these stories because like I was at least lucky living in Western Mass that you know we had access to places like I could drive. Folks and family would drive to like Hartford, we go to Boston. Like when you're in Vermont, it feels like it's isolated, and so I felt like there was like always a responsibility that you should be like finding these stories and like putting them out there, so that like people like so even when I left, people like have it on record that like this stuff existed. I spent a lot of time working on this story about the first Black woman in the Vermont legislature. She was like, it was back in like maybe the 80s, 90s, I can't remember. And so I ended up talking to her son and talking to people who would like work with her on her campaign in Vermont. And it was another story where it's like, probably didn't get a lot of clicks, probably didn't like, you know, people didn't probably subscribe a whole lot to it, but it's like, if people, like if she's recognized now and put up like on that track, like it's important that people like look back and say like, you know, there were people here who like tried to make an impact in Vermont, and um, there were black people. There still are black people.
Yeah. What do you want to represent when you report on those kind of stories?
Uh, I mean, I don't even think about myself. I just think about like, can we be having better conversations? Like the more we can make those kind of stories or coverage consistent, the more we can start to like push outside of like the same old. Like I think about like Juneteenth, for example, like when that kind of became like a national holiday and people kind of recognize it, it's like, you know, I mean, I started to learn about that when I was in college and like taking African American history classes, and it's like people have been knowing about that history for a long time, and now it just finally became this holiday in such a short amount of time, and that was kind of like seen as like the response to like the George Floyd protests and uprising. They're like, hey, we're gonna give you all a holiday, you know, like that's kind of like the concession we're gonna make. And I'm like, nah, like that's not the end of it. You know, I don't need to see Nancy Pelosi like taking a knee, you know,
We won't stop killing you, but we will give you a holiday. So
yeah, we're gonna give you Walmart's gonna make us ice cream. like, yeah, I mean, I just feel like the conversations can be stopped when we like let them end the story. You know, tell the story there where it'd be like, this is enough. And so as a reporter, I guess I'm always thinking like, yeah, we got to be pushing the envelope. We got to constantly be like pushing to tell challenging stories that like are not going to be all neat, or at least like put enough stories out there so over time people are like, okay, this is just what they're going to be reporting on. Like that Vermont paper is going to end up talking about race so much, and even if you get people coming in and being like, what are you talking about? Like, why is this an issue? Like Vermont's like doesn't have a racism problem or whatever. It's like, no, we're going to just like flood and highlight all the voices of people of color here to just remind you what's going on, and like talk about like the economic inequality enough times so that people know what's going on, or like the housing crisis or whatever. Like I just feel like, you know, we as reporters, or writers just like take on that responsibility of like, yeah, telling the stories that people want us to be telling. Because otherwise it's like the newspaper can kind of be just like a magazine, which I'm not saying like magazines are bad, but like people can just like pick it up and don't feel like I need to like, this isn't just like news that actually impacts my life, but this is news that I read for entertainment. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think it's possible to be 100% objective? Because you know you're taught that in journalism school about objectivity.
Nah, I mean, McBride told me,
Yeah.
McBride was the one who changed me otherwise. I remember I went to the National Association of Black Journalists conference a couple years back, when it actually was in Detroit, in 2018, and I got to hear Nicole Hannah-Jones speak, and she basically was like, you know, people always talk about objectivity. I feel like what I take is like fairness and accuracy. Like if you're fair and you're accurate with your reporting, that's all you can really ask for. And I always kind of stick that in my mind because I'm like, yeah, like all I can really, like, I know what my experiences are coming from. Like, I remember when I had my interview for my job at Burlington, they asked me like, are you still affiliated with Black Lives Matter? Because you did that in high school. And I was like,
Wait, could you repeat that? You remember when you had your what?
When I had my interview going to
Okay.
Vermont, like they asked me like, you know, like, are you still affiliated with like BLM? Like, you know, we something about like, you know, we had a reporter at one time who was like still connected to Amnesty International or some like kind of organization, and like we just can't have you still connected with like anything that's political. And I mean, I remember the time being like, I mean, I'm not a part of the organization anymore. Like, I'm not doing that work. But like, I mean, the values and the ideas that were in there, like, I was like, yeah, that's like, I still cling to that, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
of course.
I do think Black Lives Matter, you know?
It's not just an organization. It's a, you know, It's a human rights issue.
The statement. It's like it's like me. It's us like speaking about like our existence, like our humanity, like. And so it was a weird question at the time, and I think that was always like the fear I had as a reporter, like how much do you step outside of like your role as this like you said objective person and like tell stories that like you actually care about. How close do you get to organizers and activists before people think like, oh, like are you just trying to tell a friendly story about them, like how are you going to get the other side of this, all that kind of stuff pops up. um but yeah, I think to me, I don't really think of it as objectivity. I'm just like, I want to tell a fair, accurate story. I want to tell a story that like tells as full a picture as possible. I want to tell the stories that like are constantly not always being shown in the mainstream news, or like are not, or talk to the people who don't always get their voices heard. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Did you ever
and I
want to?
think
Hmm?
and yeah, I was gonna say like I think it's still like messed up today, especially on social media. Like reporters don't get to like retweet or like share
Yeah.
anything. Like companies will literally try to tell you like if like a protest happens, if a police killing happens, like you can't say this, you can't like don't be liking people's tweets. I feel like I'm only really comfortable just like retweeting and sharing stuff about the Celtics every now and then and just be like that's what I'm comfortable with. But like yeah, like it can be tough to be a young reporter and feel like these newspapers are trying to stifle your voice and tell you you can't do this because it doesn't look good for the brand.
Yeah. Did you ever want to be 100% objective?
Uh, Not really. I think I just knew when I came into this, like that wasn't what I wanted. Like even just being in my journaling classes, I mean, it's like there were mostly white kids in that class, and I think that we were around people who like probably knew they wanted to be reporters ever since they had like a toy typewriter when they were growing up as a kid. Like I couldn't say that. Like I didn't really know I wanted to be a journalist until I was taking classes. Um, I liked writing, um, but I never really had the values of like, you know, I didn't have the values that other people seemed to be like coming into it with, and I wasn't always sacred about like journalism is this protected thing. I just knew that like we needed more storytellers. There's a generation of people who like were always boxed out of reporting that finally can be involved, and whether you're going to be in like a traditional newsroom or do your own thing, like that's important. So yeah, objectivity just never made sense to me. Um, just because I know who I am, and I know like even most of my friends, and I did stuff like Rebirth Project. I was doing like the radio station. Like I couldn't accept objectivity because I worked with so many students and people who just felt like they'd never be able to be on the radio or be in the news, and like always wanted to tell a story that was personal to them and was personal because they're impacted by it. So it's just like, how are you going to exclude those people from like reporting because they have a personal connection to something?
Yeah. And I mean, it's only natural to have a personal connection to
Yeah.
anything because you're human. So you're now a reporter for Chalk Beat, which is nonprofit, compared to Burlington Free Press, which is a part of the USA Today system. Why make the transition to a nonprofit organization and not stay within the system of major news conglomerates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing. I mean, to me, it's the like the finance model, like the idea that things have to be hidden behind a paywall, or you have to subscribe to get news. I don't know. It just seems crazy to me. Like I just don't think people. I mean, I want people to, as a reporter, like I want to be able to like, get my bread. I want to be able to like support, my family. But I just don't think everyday people, especially if we're talking about like trying to make news that impacts people who are like the most marginalized, it doesn't make sense to me to like have to hide that from people, or have to say like once you get to this news event that like I spent like maybe a month reporting, a couple of weeks reporting, that like you can't repeat it unless you pay this amount, even if it's just like $1 a week or something. It's still just like maybe somebody needs that dollar, you know, and I can't be like assuming anything or otherwise. So it was like a big decision to like move towards a nonprofit for me. Like that was a big factor of like saying like if this news is free, if this news is accessible, then I feel like I'm happier with my work that way. Because that did end up being like a big like challenge for me while I was in Vermont, was just like people had increasingly started to like um not like the paper I worked at because of the changes that are happening by the company that like Gannett USA Today.
Yeah.
And they felt like the newsroom was being cut down.
Yeah.
There's probably like only like two handfuls of us at that time. Like people in other newsrooms across the country were being laid off, all that kind of stuff. And like I felt that it was hard to not feel like, one, like I don't know if I'm going to have a job in a couple of weeks from now or in a year from now. And also just like, why is this like, if my goal coming into journalism was like about like it being like accountable to the people, then like why stay around a place where I don't know if it's reaching all the people? I don't know. I don't know if people are picking up the newspaper like that anymore. So that was finally when I made the decision in my mind to start looking for other jobs.
Was it hard
to
make that decision?
Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit easier because I like at the time, like my girlfriend and I were long distance, and she grew up in Cincinnati, and I was like, I know I want to move closer to her. But yeah, it was still hard because I think I like liked the place I was working at. I felt like I like still had more stories to tell. I wanted to continue to like connect with the folks and friends that I had, and like try to like tell those stories about like the immigrant communities that were spread out around there. And I felt like I hadn't done that like perfectly to it justice. I just like kind of like gotten into it after like a year and a half there. So it was a little bittersweet, but I think at the same time I was like, this would probably be good for me. Like if I really want to like do reporting that's like covering something like consistent every day, then I have to kind of like leave to go somewhere else. I probably could have gotten a job at a different place in Vermont, but I was kind of like, it's so small that like once you leave to go to another place, it doesn't feel like you're like, you're still stuck in everything. So I felt like I needed to just move to a different state.
Yeah. Big step.
Yeah.
So obviously both publications are different. Free Press, Burlington Free Press is more of a traditional newspaper, and Chalk Beat covers education. But outside of what the main differences are, what are the other differences?
Yeah, I think it just like, I mean, the biggest thing to me, and I speak to anybody, it's like we're unionized. It helps to have a union. It helps to feel like the job security, like the security is there, that we like are collectivized and working together. I think there's like an appreciation of, if you work long hours, like you can have like time off, you can like get away from it. Like education journalism is no joke. People are covering school board meetings. I'm lucky I just have to cover one school district, but there are people who live in, I know of other education reporters who have to cover like 5 or 6 school districts in an area and can feel burnt out, can feel like they're also not being paid well enough. Yeah, I mean, that would be the biggest thing, I'm living in Detroit. I'm not living in Vermont, and just like the culture here, just like being in the Midwest, it's beautiful. I really like it here. I've gotten to like not only just like be around Detroit and see that, but because my girlfriend's from Cincinnati, I get to like explore Ohio and go to different cities there. So like, yeah, I'm liking it. We went to Chicago a couple months back So it's just nice to be in a new area, um, in a new culture, experiencing it all. Uh, yeah, because I think for myself, especially like we talked about, like growing up as a black kid in a predominantly white space, like there is always that like weird feeling about like what is it going to feel like when I'm actually just like in a predominantly black space. Um, and so to be in Detroit is like that first opportunity I've ever really had. So it's like, yeah, been like a cool experience to have. Yeah.
Yeah. You like Detroit?
Yeah, it's cool. And it's really cool. I really like I like I still feel like obviously I got like a lot to sort of see of the city, but like it's like the right pace for me. Like it's a city that like there can be stuff happening on so many different parts of it, but you also feel like you can really get connected. Like either it's like within your block or like your neighborhood or um just like showing up to events and seeing people from other places, seeing people, um yeah, I mean I live on the east side and like it's very like, you're on the west side, you're on the east side. So
Yeah.
like that's kind of like who you connect with, where like what street you're from. Um but yeah, for a young person, I think especially, yeah, just like trying to like enjoy that experience of being young too. It's like this is the place I really want to be. I had come here in 2016 or 2015 when I was still an organizer with Black Lives Matter for this conference, and then a couple of years after that, I came for that Black Journalism conference, and I was like, back then I was like, I want to be here. Like it was like it just was like you know something about just like the history of it. I think
Yeah.
with like knowing the fact about Motown, knowing the fact about like the car industries and just like people here, because I'm a history buff, I just like being in a place where I feel like history is constantly speaking to you and around you. Um, and yeah, it just made sense. So, it was like, I feel like it was like, well, it was God or just like, life events turning out where like I ended up here a couple years after that. It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
the stars lining.
Yeah. What do Detroit schools and students need, like that they're missing?
Resources. I
Yeah.
think Detroit, I mean, Detroit went through, was pretty hit by the financial crisis that happened in like 08, 09. Um, Up until 2017, 2018, I might be wrong. Like they were like they're under emergency management from like Michigan. And you saw a lot of schools closed down and a lot of deterioration happening to housing and people just leaving or being uprooted and um it just got hit hard. And I think like students that I've talked to just feel like they've been like stripped of a better education and the kind of experiences that you see when you step outside into the suburbs that surround Detroit. Um, and I mean, yeah, I think like it feels impacted in like, you know, the literacy rates. Like there's still like a lot of people who walk away not like having like a at grade level reading. Um, it like is impacted in just like how people actually get to graduate from Detroit schools or people who have to be forced to go to charter schools or go to the suburb schools to just get
Yeah.
that kind of better education. Um, you know, but it's also a school system like, and I mean, I never really got to experience that in Amherst, or I really got to see it in Vermont, like the pride that people have for their schools. Like if you say like, I went to Pershing, I went to Northwestern, I went to Cass Tech, Renaissance. All these schools mean something to people that went to them, and like it has its resonance. And um, I think like what I'm hoping to see and hoping to get to cover is just like yeah, like that, like the pride that students want to have or should have for their schools, and like
Yeah.
coming from Detroit and like feeling like you know you like there's a resilience to living in this city and to having seen what people have seen here and like still wanting to say like I came up from here, and now I can do anything. So it's pretty powerful to me. Like
Yeah.
I sit with that a lot. Like you know, I've kind of gotten into this mode where like anytime I am like anywhere, I'm always trying to find out like, yo, did you go to DPS? Like, did you go to the schools? And like, give my car to people. Like, I'll talk to my Uber driver. I'll talk to the lady who does my locks and just be like, asking people like, tell me about what your experience was like in the schools. And like, I think it hits for so many people. Like everybody here collectively wants to see Detroit schools do better. I think it just all depends on like, you know, are we actually going to get the money and the resources to do that? And are people going to have the control back to really change the school to where they want it to be?
Oh, sorry. Why make that transition to reporting exclusively about education?
Uh, it wasn't like a given to me because I think I was really comfortable doing any kind of beat at first. I think it was really like I want to learn about a field and like about a specific area. But I think it was also because like the work that I was always doing from college was about talking to students and about like trying to make that connection between what young people are experiencing and then like how that in the school system and then how they also are impacted by what's happening around their community. So education just made sense. I thought about being a teacher for a while I was in school first for a second. Like, did I want to go to teach in high school? My mom, all my life, has worked in the school system. My dad as well. So it kind of was like always like, if there was going to be something that I really wanted to like unpack and learn deeply about and like try to tell stories about, it was going to be um, about school. And yeah, I always felt like my one skill was like in my work with students, I felt like I could try to like get to their level and like break down like, like what's going on, like talk to like, so I think like that was something that clicked like I'm going to be able to make that kind of impact as a reporter and like be able to really like talk to parents, talk to students, like really be like a listening ear, which maybe I didn't feel like I could get if I was doing like housing or healthcare. Because I thought some other beats or some other like reporting opportunities, they weren't going to be as people focused
Yeah.
as I would have liked. Like I like the fact that like I have to talk to people for this job. Like I can't just like talk to like um communications people or like talk to like spokespersons or like officials. Like I can talk to principals, I can talk to the superintendent, but I also have to just talk to like teachers, students, and parents every day.
Yeah. So you've been a part of journalism in multiple capacities: student, intern, working for different publications. What have you learned thus far being a journalist and being a reporter?
I've learned that um, it takes a lot of like it. Well, it doesn't really get easier. Like I don't think I ever get to a point where like I go into an interview and I feel confident. I think I still feel um, every person I speak to, like I have to like hype myself up. I have to remind myself, okay, like these are the questions I come into. Like um, I still have to learn. Like I'm just constantly learning, and I think that was like maybe I just didn't really know that that was going to be a part of the job. That it was going to be so much like you're constantly learning on the go. Like people are going to have so much more knowledge they've accumulated to that you're going to really have to pull from them. Um, it takes really getting to know people on like a personal level, trying to like really try to in like an interview that might be like 10 minutes to like an hour, like try to get as much about them, get them to really describe like everything they can, the details around them to really tell a story well. Like I think like yeah, journalism has really taught me more about being a storyteller than I could have ever imagined, and that it's like not as just simple as just like taking down a quote from somebody, but really like every piece of it. Um, and then on top of that, like the history of it, like you need to understand the context to get to like knowing like the full picture of what people are talking about. Um, like um, yeah, and on the everyday stuff. I mean, I think you kind of always feel like you're on the go. Like I don't think I'm ever like not thinking about like what I should be writing about or what more to be covering.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, I think I'm always trying to look to improve and think that like uh, there's always like a new story to be told. So yeah, journalism just taught me like like things are never like always be on your toes and like just constantly be willing to learn and like adapt.
Yeah. And what's next for Ethan Bakuli?
I mean, yeah, I'm just hoping to stick with this for a while. Like like I said, like I'm liking to try. I mean, I'm about to be a year here in like a month or so, and so
Congrats.
thanks. Yeah, I'm just trying to like settle my roots, continue to like build on it, see what's next for me. Whether that's like just like moving up as an editor down the road. I still think about like history. Like I want to do like archival work at some point in my life. Like I like that kind of research about like specific histories of people. And I'm East African, so I'm always like, we need to like spotlight more East African history, all that kind of stuff. But for right now, like just really continue to learn more about Detroit schools, continue to talk to more Detroit parents, teachers, students, and tell the stories that need to be told.
Yeah. And lastly, why do words matter to you?
Words matter because I think without them, we're lost. I think without them, we let other people tell our stories or describe experiences or events in just ways that like might harm us down the road. So when I think on the words I'm writing, I'm always trying to think like, how is this going to have a ripple effect for what's to come for folks, what's to happen.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you, Ethan Bakuli, for allowing me to interview you. Nice seeing you again. I haven't seen you since graduation. So, yeah, that was, once again, thank you for allowing me to interview you on my platform, and continue success in all you do as far as bringing awareness to issues that need to be brought awareness to, and your work as a journalist and as a reporter in Detroit and wherever it leads you next. For everybody out there watching, everybody listening, please subscribe. Find that Words Matter Network page on YouTube. Please like, comment, and subscribe this video and all other videos. And we're also found on, you could also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please subscribe and share and rate, even more specifically, on those platforms. And thank you. Words matter.